of the things that happens throughout history is that new stories emerge to explain what we've always dealt with as human beings. We always focus on the things that affect us the deepest. And so regardless of the story or paradigm we use to talk about it, there are very important central themes. And one of the big themes throughout mythology and religion, which one could say is a mythology, is the exploration between heaven and demonic beings, realms, etc. And one of the paradigms in mythology is that human beings are in the midground, that there's the demonic realm that's beneath us, that there's the heavenly realm that is above us, and that human beings are in the middle. Now, in the last 100 or so years, we've largely cast out the reference to demons and angels and hell and heaven in favor of the rational, in favor of what can be observed through a scientific lens. And one of the interesting developments is, of course, we still have to deal with the material that originally sparked all of this interest in either heavenly beings or demonic beings. We now need to find a new story to relate to that. And brain development offers such a narrative within the paradigm of scientific rationalism. So the human being, in many ways, is a representation of the entirety of planet Earth. You know, many of nature's patterns, because they're successful, are fractal, meaning that life or nature is a winner, and so she uses things that work at bigger and smaller scale. This largely makes sense. If a triangle is a strong shape, if it's a big triangle, it's probably a strong shape when it's a small triangle. And so many of life and nature's patterns are fractal. You just find smaller and smaller micro versions of the macro versions, and you find macro versions within macro versions within macro versions, a largely fractal pattern. And what nature has largely done on planet Earth is took very small amoeba-like cell-like structures and grew them into more and more complex structures, and then they became algae and fungi and moved into various plants, and from various plants became reptiles, and cold-blooded reptiles and things. And then through a period of time, reptiles became mammals, and then mammals became humans. And nature was underwater for part of the time and emerged out of the water, and then moved more upright, and then developed language. And what's interesting is that the human body goes through the entire evolution of the planet in about 25 years. It's a fractal microcosm of evolution. We start out as human beings as one cell, and then we divide into two cells and divide into more and more. We go through that algae stage. We start underwater in the womb. We develop more and more complexity. We eventually birth out of the water onto dry land. We crawl on all fours. Our brains, the most ancient brain is the reptilian brain. We have the limbic brain. We have the rational brain. And then what makes us human is the empathic brain. And what makes us divine is the transcendent brain. When you have dreams, when you have ecstatic sexual experience, when you have a sense of moving beyond the self, when you have near-death experiences, the transcendent brain is illuminated, is activated with endogenous dimethyltryptamine, DMT, inside the brain, to have these most magical and visionary experiences of feeling part of something bigger than ourselves. So we have the entire history. Out of nothing comes something. Life created the universe, according to current narratives, from something the size of a pea, and poof, something bigger and bigger and bigger emerges, and now we have the entire universe. And at some point, this entire planet fit in to that little bit that was less than the size of a pea, and at some point, every human being fit into a little, something the size of less than the size of a pea, and so you have this microcosmic pattern, this macrocosmic pattern. Now, the reptilian brain has a number of correlations with what we would refer to as a demon or a demonic mindset, etc., in mythology. Because the reptilian brain is fight, flight, or if neither of those two things are available, freeze. And a human version that we've developed in more recent times is called fawn or aslick. So you fight what is smaller than you if you're a reptile. You run from what is bigger than you, because if you're a reptile in a reptilian paradigm, it's consumptive. There's no empathy. The big attacks and feeds on the small. If neither of those options are available, you freeze. Or if you can ally yourself with someone bigger and climb the ladder together, make yourself indispensable to a powerful person in the cult, then you've got the possibility to climb with them, because they won't bring you with them because they love and care. Reptiles don't love and care. But they will bring you with them out of enlightened self-interest, meaning if you make yourself very useful to them and you manage to keep being useful to them, they will take you as long as you are useful, because you are useful. And so your job is to make yourself useful and ally yourself with a powerful person. And to the extent you succeed, they will carry you along and protect you, because it's a form of self-protection. They're really interested in themselves. And so if you're good at helping them, then they will be interested in you from that angle. So you have the reptilian brain. Then you have the rational brain, which is neutral. It's just pattern analyzing. And then you move into the human being terrain, where you have the empathic brain. And empathy is the opposite of the reptilian paradigm. And if you think of what evolution and life is doing with these different stages of development, the reptilian paradigm is fear and pain based. And so out of fear and pain, you have the survival of the fittest, you have the survival of the fastest. And so you compete and generate competency through the reptilian paradigm. If you have no empathy, if you have no love, if you have no vision, what's going to get you to run out of the way? What's going to make you evolve in a consumptive environment that is largely sociopathic, where if something's bigger than you and can use you, either to rape you or to steal from you or to eat you, it does, because it can. And it's in a mode of survival. But if you can run away, you do because you can, because you're in a mode of survival. And so you have a competition between the big one and the small one. The big one is trying to devour and consume the small one is trying to run away. And it's profoundly sociopathic. It's classic bullying dynamic. And the bully and the victim collude, collaborate, compete and draw out competency in one another. Because if you don't learn to run faster, you don't escape the bully. If you don't learn to chase faster, you don't get your meal. And so the reptilian protocol is life creating competency through fear and pain and hunger in the goal of survival. And the reptilian brain does a very good job of this. If you run from something bigger than you, if you consume something smaller than you, if you freeze when neither of those options are available, you will grow and you will last longer than if you do not. And a big tiger comes running at you and you just lay there. Then the tiger is fueled and fed, but you are not. And so that apathy dies out. And so the reptilian brain, which is anything but empathic or human, develops competency out of fear and pain. And that brain is within every human being, and it tends to develop to the extent that an infant, a child, is traumatized. Because to the extent that an infant or a child is traumatized, it is in a sociopathic and incompetent cult. Because an empathic and competent cult does not allow their young to be traumatized. So, by default, if a young member of the tribe is traumatized, either the guardians, the parents, do not care about the infant, which is sociopathic, or they do not care enough to be competent, which is sociopathic. Because we have enough resources on the planet. We have enough energy, we have enough air, we have enough resources for every human being to meet all of their human needs, to survive, to feel secure, to experience love and belonging, to develop self-esteem, to develop their personal gifts and talents, to bring those meaningfully into the world, to become part of something bigger than themselves. To create abundance through their talents. We can do that for every single human being, and we can do so with less energy than we're consuming per capita today. We can do it with more grace than we're doing today. So the question is, why are we not doing that? And a lot of it is the reptilian protocols, and a lot of that is the reptilian brain, and a lot of that is childhood trauma. And so childhood trauma is the symptom of a reptilian culture, of a fear, pain-based culture. And it produces and stimulates the reptilian brain in the child to develop a sociopathic paradigm and protocol to survive in the sociopathic elements of its environment. Now, fight, flight, freeze without empathy, attack that which is smaller than it, is, in a sense, a corollary for the demonic realm. To prey on the young, to kill women, to exploit the poor. We talk about this as devilish or demonic or evil activity. but it's really reptilian programming. And the reptilian brain is the oldest brain in every human being. Now, as we go into the rational brain, we start thinking and being aware. I'm being a reptile. I don't really like this part of it. Or I don't like this part of you. Or that doesn't seem right. Or this. You become more aware. You don't have empathy necessarily, but you at least start to organize patterns. You realize that even if I'm a sociopath, it's a good thing that we trust money. Because if nobody would take my money, because we all believed that the other was a crook, then we couldn't buy anything. If without any trust, it is an incredible inefficient system. And so you can move towards collaboration and cooperation through efficiency. You can move in that direction through just rationality, pattern analysis, and efficiency analysis. And so there's a huge leap in abundance. So we've got competency is the deliverable of the reptilian brain. And then we have abundance, which increases the security of survival. We have survival and security of survival in the rational brain. Because the rational brain, as a pattern analyzing brain, allows us to predict the future. If I can predict that putting this cap on this pen will preserve the pen, and as a result, this pen is not dry next time I use it, I have 1,000 times more abundance, because this pen will last 1,000 more days than if on the very first day I just leave it out to dry out. I could leave this for a year with the cap on. I can only leave it for a day, with the cap off. But I have to figure that out. That's the rational brain. It's neutral. It's neither empathic or sociopathic. It just says, this is how things work. Now, if I had to buy a new pen every time because I didn't know that they dry out, then I have to buy a lot more pens. If I have to buy a new car because I don't know to put gas in it, and I think you buy a car for $30,000 and you go for 300 miles and then you have to buy a new car because I don't understand the pattern of fuel. And so, every 5 years I save up enough money to buy a new car and go 300 miles and then I walk on foot. You can see how inefficient that is. You can see how much abundance is delivered through the rational brain, which is the pattern organizing and recognition brain, which allows us to predict the future, which allows us to then to take steps to influence the future and create 1,000 times more abundance, whether it's pens or cars or money. When you can predict the future, you can also think that in human life. If I can't predict that stepping out in front of a fast-moving bus is going to end my life, if I can't grasp that there's a connection between my life and stepping out in front of a bus, well, there's no reason not to step out in front of a bus. Some butterfly flying over, I follow it, boom, I'm dead. Obviously, that's a decrease in abundance. And so the rational brain brings abundance. And then the empathic brain, which is the human brain that turns us from animals to human being, brings us love and belonging. So in the hierarchy of human needs as outlined by Abraham Maslow, the first human need, like oxygen, is survival. The second human need is security of survival. That comes from abundance and some sense of being able to predict the future. The third need is love and belonging. And that comes from empathy. That comes from being able and willing to empathize with oneself and another human being. If you cannot empathize with yourself, you cannot love yourself. If you cannot love yourself, you cannot love another, because as a fractal representation, many of life's patterns, human beings are very, very similar, at the very least in their probability field. You know, if you raise a traumatized child and don't give it any touch in the first 3 months and, you know, give it addictive crack, cocaine and stuff, you can turn that otherwise incredibly healthy child into a tremendously traumatized and sick individual. And similarly, if you took that same child and gave it, you know, healthy parental care and all of that, you can have a very happy child. So we're very similar in the raw material. What happens to us in different contexts can vary greatly. And so, you know, we're very different in that way. But if I cannot accept myself and who I've become in this environment, then I also cannot accept others and who they have become. So there's a deep marrying in that. And to move towards the third human need of love and belonging, we need empathy. We need the empathic brain. Now, the empathic brain is the opposite of the reptilian brain, because the reptilian protocol is to fight that which is smaller and run from what is bigger. Now, the empathic protocol is to stand up for the small one. The crocodile, using the reptilian protocol, if a couple is wandering along the river and a 5-year-old boy is walking 3 feet behind the couple and they're being together. Now, the crocodile wants food. Now, its reptilian protocol dictates that he will attack the 5-year-old. Now, the reason is simple. The 5-year-old is smaller, is less dangerous than the parent, than the adults, and there's only one. So it's slower, it's smaller, and there's only one. Okay, that's what we attack. Now, empathy dictates the exact opposite. Don't pick on someone smaller than yourself is the statement of an empathic brain, not a reptilian brain. It's the exact opposite. The reptilian brain is saying, of course you pick on something smaller than yourself because you're trying to survive. And if you want to survive, you need to win. And the best way to win is to be 10 times bigger than your prey. You know, don't fight armies that are well armed. Go fight and steal from people who have no alarms, no defenses, no training. Steal from an old lady is a reptilian protocol. She can't attack back. She can't do this. Let's get her. And so, but empathy is the exact opposite. And this is the human state, the sense. And so when we talk about descending into hell, descending into the demonic realms, we're talking about going numb. Because when you're traumatized, the empathic brain is overloaded with stimuli. And in that overloaded state, it shuts off. If that overloading energy cannot be diffused and grounded down through community support, then that it shuts down through overloaded circuitry. And in that state, we descend into our reptilian brain. Now, we're still rational for the most part, and the most dangerous predator on the planet is a highly rational sociopath. Because the reptilian brain cannot feel love or empathy, and it's terrified, and it needs to survive, but it is highly rational. The empathic brain has shut down. Now, this could be called descending or, deteriorating, devolving into a demon or into an evil person, as we think of that, someone who's not safe. And so you have the demonic potential, and it's really nice in Chinese cinematography and stuff. There's so many, there's so much of the Chinese mythology is kind of going the relationship between demon and human, and it's absolutely correct. A demon can evolve to become more human, a human can devolve to become more demonic, but the movement is, if you want to move from the demonic region of the brain or the reptilian region of the brain, you have to move towards rationality with the goal of creating abundance. And in the hierarchy of human needs, first you have to survive. Then you have to feel the security of that survival. As soon as you survive and feel secure in your survival, you move into level 3, which is the empathic, which is the need for love and belonging. So when you move into love and belonging, you move into the empathic brain, you become a human being. But that part of the brain does not open in the budding process. If you think of a cherry or an almond blossom, in the frost in the winter, they are very tight and protected. And as the spring, as the temperature thaws, they slowly work their way out. The sap works its way out to the tree. The bud begins to blossom and opens up a little bit. Now, as the temperature gets sustainably warmer, as the bud believes that it will not be frostbitten and lose the crop, it will slowly open, and give fruit, give rise to a self-perpetuating seed, a peach, an almond, a cherry. Now, the brain is similar. In the cold temperatures of sociopathic abuse and trauma, you've got the reptilian brain developed. You maybe move up a bit into the rational brain with time through language. But if you keep learning to survive and feel secure in that survival through the reptilian and rational brain, through fight, flight, and freeze, you successfully consume that which is smaller than you. You successfully run away from that which is bigger than you. You learn to cooperate with other reptiles in such a way as to create more and more abundance. The innate need is to become something more, which is to seek the third need that every human has, which is for love and belonging. And in order to do that, you must enter the empathic terrain. But if you open up the very sensitive receptacles of the empathic brain in high states of scarcity and fear, you will be paralyzed in pain and fear, which is why the reptilian or the empathic brain shuts down in unmitigated trauma, in PTSD. The empathic brain shuts down. And you move towards love and belonging. That's the opposite of the reptilian. Protect what is smaller. Make sacred. Make another person sacred by making a sacrifice. I will not go ahead right now and leave you to be attacked by wolves. I will slow down and walk until you are there. Women and children first. All of these are empathic programs. Forgiveness, empathy, understanding, compassion. All of this comes from the empathic region of the brain. And then we look at the angels and we look at at heaven. And heaven is that state which we touch on currently because the temperature is not warm enough. Whereas in the developmental cycle of human beings, the human animal becoming the human being, we have large amounts of undiagnosed and untreated childhood trauma, leading to large amounts of fight, flight, freeze, and reptilian activity, leading to bullying, leading to secrecy, leading to high levels of fear and pain, resentment, rage. All of this is all in the domain of the reptilian program. We become rational and hopefully grow through and out of that state to create more and more abundance and security in our human needs. And then we're moving towards love and belonging. And every time a fearful, challenging event happens, etc., we collapse out of, love and belonging back into the reptilian brain of scarcity and fight, flight, and freeze, and all of those dynamics out of fear and pain. But up here, we have the transcendent brain. These are the angelic realms. This is where you open the blossom into its full beauty, and you understand and feel and live the interconnectedness of all things. Now again, when you're in survival and security and terror and pain and you feel interconnected with all things, it feels overwhelming, hopeless, etc., so that brain shuts down. The empathic brain shuts down. But when there's high degrees of love and belonging, this empathic brain opens and warms the reality, creates enough love and belonging that there's a field, there's a vibration, there's a warmth. And in that field of love and belonging, the transcendent brain opens up. And it stays open until a trauma, a terror, a scarcity crashes it down. But that is to live in the heavenly, in the heavenly realms, to be aware of our interconnectivity, to enjoy and be a part of something bigger than ourselves, to transcend the limited identity of the body and the cult, to become part of the ecology of all that is. This is absolute heaven. And we're just telling the story in a new way through brain physiology that has always been told. There have been 10,000 cults in human history, and most of them have had a mythological dimension. And in that mythological dimension, there's a vertical dimension of ascent and descent. And descent is typically associated with devolution. And you think of the reptilian nature, the snake, this. We're talking about the reptilian brain. Then we have the rational, we have the rational stage of evolution, the empathic, and the transcendent. Now, the empathic state is to create love and belonging. And the transcendent state is God, goddess, and grace. Grace is very high on the intelligence continuum because within grace you have an effortlessness of transcendent well-being. Within grace you have an effortlessness of beauty, truth, and goodness. It takes less and less energy. It takes less and less energy to create more and more sustainable well-being. Creates less and less energy to transform energy into sustainable human well-being, and more ecstasy, ecstasis. You have the stasis of security and control. And then you have the liberation, the transcendence of that boundary, of that barrier. And it's a good way of looking with empathy and compassion, with science, and with understanding on the up and the downward waves that we take as a cult or culture, that we take as families, that we take as communities and individuals, the more we traumatize members of our species, of our cult, the more they will descend into their reptilian brain. The more they descend into their reptilian brain, the more focused they are on survival. The more focused they are on survival in a sociopathic paradigm, which is the paradigm of seeing people in pain and not doing anything about it, the more they will attack what is smaller than them, run from what is bigger than them, freeze when neither of those are available, and make alliances with power rather than dignity and character. Well, if you damage too many people and create highly intelligent sociopaths out of that demographic, they will undermine the well-being of others because there's no empathy there, because they're in too much pain for the empathic brain to blossom. Similarly, through the reptilian paradigm of fight, flight, and freeze and stuff, you create a certain amount of abundance, a certain amount of success, and can move upwards. And in that upward movement, one can reach the transcendent brain, in which there's tremendous amount of empathy. Now, the way to know if you're in an empathic paradigm, an empathic circle, is two questions. These are the questions of the empath. Who is in the most pain? How can we help? Who is in the most pain? How can we help? When those two questions are being asked and answered and acted on, we are moving upward towards transcendence of the ego identity as a separate illusion of I'm over here and I have nothing to do with the rest of the world. That sense of separation is fostered with pain, fear, and trauma, and beliefs of separation and unlovability, which every abused child internalizes. Every abused child internalizes the belief that they are unlovable. The belief that they are unlovable causes excruciating amounts of pain. Excruciating amounts of pain unmedicated leads to the shutting down of the empathic brain. The shutting down of the empathic brain leads to an activation and reactivation of the reptilian protocol. And you have, in mythological terms, you have a human demon. You have someone with the analytical talents of a human being in the body of a human being who is behaving sociopathically as a reptile, using the fight, flight, freeze protocol to survive their reptilian and sociopathic environment that induced them into this state and did not help them get out of it.